Well, because all of a sudden it's 11 o'clock and I didn't realize how the time was going by. Yeah, and the camera's not working. So it's not hooked up. So I don't know. Okay, so we got a lot of material to get through today, and it's really only 4 forms that I'm going to be going over with you that are going to become now part of our forms library as revisions to previous forms. And they're major revisions having to do with buyer agency. So these are, this thing was not.
It's been falling all morning.
Oh,
I don't think I'm gonna be able to
so I
fix
set
right
it back on there. I don't know what that. I thought you might know the trick. Yeah, I didn't even, all of a sudden it just fell off on the table. I tried hooking it up again, but I just. So I'm already set up on for the
Yep.
Zoom.
Yep, you're good. Let's
Okay.
do that.
All right. So so the 4 forms I'm going to go over with you are going to be Form 1A, which is the listing contract, Form 21, which is the purchase and sale contract, Form 41, and Form 41C. Okay, so you should have those in front of you. Now, if you also have Form 1C there, that's the listing addendum. If we are going to be using our own listing form, which I don't know, that's going to be up, I guess, to the ALC to decide. So if you want to talk to the ALC, give them your 2 cents on that, on whether you think we should have our own listing form or not. I tend to not like to do that, but I might be the lone wolf on that. So to share with the ALC, and then the ALC can make a decision on that. And then, and if everybody wants to have our own listing form, we can do it. We can also, by the way, have our own buyer agency form. So, no, I said we can also have our own buyer agency form if we want to. And I just don't want to go there, at least not now. And there's no hurry to do it either. So we don't have to race to beat that October 3rd deadline, which is when these new forms are coming out. Okay, so October 3rd is when we will toss all of the other existing forms of these and have our own. But again, the Form 1C that you got in your packets is just going to be used as an addendum to our own listing form if we choose to do that. And I'm not going to go over that one with you because it's basically a listing agreement, because they had to put everything in there that the MLS is going to require for there to be this offer of cooperation and compensation. So that is how our MLS has always worked, is on the basis of cooperation and compensation. Okay, and so how it's always worked in the past is that a listing commission is paid to the listing agent, or brokerage, sorry, the listing brokerage. And then from that commission, the listing brokerage has indicated in the listing how much of that they're going to share with the selling office. Okay, so that's the past premise. Okay, that's all been done away with now as of October 3rd. No longer is it going to be a shared situation with the commission. It's going to be a completely separate issue between the listing brokerage and the buyer's brokerage. And the seller is going to be signing a contract saying that they're going to pay the listing brokerage X amount. So let's just, just say that we're, just to use an example, because I don't violate antitrust laws, so I'm just using this as an example. So let's say it was a 6% total commission, just for math, because it makes it easier with math, right? So it would be a 3%, if it's 6%, and it was going to be intended to be, you know, a certain amount to the listing office, a certain amount to the buyer's office. It's going to be 3% to the listing office, and then there will be a separate agreement to pay 3% to the buyer's brokerage firm. Okay. And so it's not going to run, you know, it's not going to be a trickle down from the listing brokerage anymore. It's going to be a direct line to the listing brokerage and a direct line from the seller to the buyer's brokerage now. Now that's a significant change. It's not been that, it's never been that way. So it's really interesting, and I think good that that's changed that way, because the premise of buyer brokerage has always been kind of hard to understand for the general public. So I'm not good with computers and stuff, so be patient with me here for a second. There we go. Okay, so and I'm going to focus on those changes that have taken place. So let's go to Form 1A. So what Form 1A is the listing contract, right? So again, if you have the Form 1C there, that's the addendum to a firm's own listing contract if they have one. So I'm tossing that aside. I'm not going to cover that today. 1C, it's basically a listing contract.
What is the purpose of the 1C?
As an addendum to someone else's individual listing contract. So other firms, because see, the antitrust laws, we're trying to tap dance around the antitrust laws and make sure the Department of Justice doesn't come after us, right? So in order to do that, this is one of the things they indicated. They said for an MLS to have a set listing agreement is an antitrust violation. That's not giving consumers choice. And so this is a step taken in order to give that choice and that freedom, so that sellers aren't locked in, firms are not locked in to the MLS. They can do their own listing contract if they want. And then if they choose to do that, we have an addendum to make sure that those things that are necessary to make that offer of cooperation and compensation work the way it's supposed to, it's going to still be there. So that addendum is basically a listing contract of the MLS. But so, oh, you don't have that form in your packet? Oh, okay. Yeah, no. Yeah, we're going to vote on that through the ALC, and then and again, there's no hurry to make a decision on it. We can do that anytime.
Are we seeing, I haven't seen too many of the companies that have their own.
Well, the law's not in effect till October 3rd, so
They may
you
be
probably
starting
would.
to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But as of October 3rd, they may be using their own. And that's the cutoff point. Just remember that October 3rd is when all these changes are taking place, including the corresponding changes in the MLS, Northwest MLS rules and regs. Okay, so those are having to change a little bit to go along with the forms and to deal with the DOJ.
So was this an RCW, or is this a new form that's put together by the Northwest Multiple?
Multiple. This is,
Okay.
yeah, this has nothing to do with license law. This is everything to do with our Northwest MLS.
Okay.
And their attempts to appease the Department of Justice, who has really been looking into MLSs under a microscope the last few years.
Given the potential length of time a listing is on the market, if under contract with a current existing listing agreement, what occurs when we pass that deadline? Or what needs to occur?
Was that a question to me?
Yes, please, John.
Oh,
Donovan asking a question.
I thought it was God talking to me and there you are. Okay, let's try that. Let's try that again. Okay, I'm sorry, and I do appreciate the question. So would you mind saying that one more time for me?
Yes, if we have a listing on market with the existing listing agreement, and then it goes past that deadline of when the new form takes effect, what should we be doing then?
That's a great question, and that should be in your frequently asked questions on Legal Bulletin 222. And so my thought on that is that you would want to replace everything on the 3rd. I would think you'd want to replace everything because otherwise, now that may not be what they've said in the Northwest MLS. So I'm just telling you what my thoughts are. Because they may say just leave it as is and let it, run its course if you've already got one in place. Because the MLS is thinking might be that that as long as we have those changes in place for the Northwest MLS, we're not going to have the DOJ sue us and come after us, even if there's some lingering stuff that's gone on from previous, right? But I think it's always wise to go with what the most current form is and use. So if you have a listing and let's say it's a 6-month listing and it's got a month left on it as of October 3rd, it might even be a good time to re-up that listing, right? To go to them and re-up that listing. As far as purchase and sale contracts go, though, no, I would not make a change with the purchase and sale contract because that's between buyer and seller. That's already been done. That's in place. And I would not write a new purchase and sale contract. Okay, that's my opinion. But under the frequently asked questions section of the Legal Bulletin 222, you might find that.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question. Sorry, I didn't know what was that. This is all new for me. Okay, so let's go down to the on Form 1A, first page 1. Let's go down to paragraph 4, which is the new compensation paragraph. So nothing else is changed. Everything else is going to be the same, but paragraph 4 for compensation is changed now, and that might have been a different paragraph, but in the prior form, but now it's paragraph 4. And so that is going to be one where you're going to, for 4A, and it says seller shall pay compensation as follows right before that. And then it says 4A listing firm compensation. So this has nothing to do with the buyer's agent's compensation. This is just the listing firm's compensation. So I was using the example, not to violate antitrust laws, just picking something out of the air of 6% total is the intent of this seller and listing broker. So listing broker puts it in there as 3%. Okay, and then it says unrepresented buyer, if the buyer is not represented by a buyer brokerage firm, then the listing firm compensation shall be, okay, so we have a listing in the example that if we have a listing and a buyer comes to us directly and we disclose to him, I'm going to represent the seller only, not you. Okay, here's the agency law pamphlet. Here's paragraph 3 that talks about duties owed toward third parties like you. So you're going to have some duties from me, but my allegiance is going to be with my seller. Okay. So in that situation, you would say that the commission is, if there's going to be a difference. So if I put 3% there and I wanted to have, in this example I'm using of numbers, and I wanted to have a full, what I feel is a full amount, if I'm going to do the buyer side for the buyer too, I would put in a 6% there. so my compensation, if I am going to be not representing the buyer, but still writing the contract and probably seeing things through to make sure my seller can sell the property to him, you know, I would put in what that total commission is going to be. Now, I know that over the years, we've had negotiations go on this with our sellers, and the seller says, well, you got this buyer directly, you're not going to do anything wrong. And the buyer says, I want to squirrel away that money for myself. And so it's, you know, you've got to have dialogues to deal with those discussions. But, you know, I've seen agents do those for 4%, you know, and 5% and 6. And it just depends on a lot on how much you're going to be doing for that buyer.
John, can I interrupt for a sec?
Sure.
Could you please have your shared screen follow the section you're talking about? Because we can't see that section, please.
Oh. Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I gotta get
Love
used
you,
to
man.
this technology stuff. Just take that off the screen. That would be to click the X, right?
John, this
Yes.
is Kristen Campbell. I have a quick question here on the paragraph 4 where it shows unrepresented buyer. If the buyer is not represented by a buyer brokerage firm, then the listing firm shall compensation shall be. So if this is someone that's wants to buy our listing and they want us to write up the offer, which of course, you know, not my favorite, but if they wanted to and they insist on it, then they're going to, I'm trying to figure out it, the listing firm compensation shall be, or am I wrong? Is this about maybe someone that's got a off-market FSBO that's asking us to write the documents?
No, you're correct.
Oh.
So in the past, if I had a listing for 6% and a buyer came directly to me, then my commission's still 6%. The buyer could scream and yell all they want and say, but I'm not represented, and so you shouldn't get 6, you should only get 3. And I should get that other 3 direct, credited to me. And our answer should have been, no, my contract's with the seller, not with you. And this is how I work. And so if you want your own representation, go get it, but this is how I work, right? So now that was in the past. Now it's a little bit, a lot different, because now we're directing the commission in the agreement from the seller. So the seller is saying, I'm going to pay a total of 6%, but in the instance of this example that Kristen just gave, that the buyer comes to me directly and wants me to write it up on my own listing and wants me to write it up, I've pre-agreed with the seller that if that situation happens, the commission is going to be X amount. That's where you put that in there.
So there's that form, if you're doing a dual agency, is it a form?
Well, agency disclosure is different. And so if it is,
In that instance, so that's what this form is saying, that automatically the seller would agree that if the buyer is unrepresented the transaction,
Right.
that they would still get the full commission.
right. But what if you, so your question is, what if you represented the buyer also?
Yes, and there was this specific
Because then it's not an
form.
unrepresented buyer.
So there's a specific form to do that, where you have to get the seller to agree to accept that they, and then you have to get the buyer to agree also that you're representing them.
Well, that's already in the agreement, but this is talking about an unrepresented buyer. So in this case example you're giving, where the buyer is represented by me also, right, my listing, in order for that to happen under Washington state law since 2014, I would have to have a buyer agency agreement already signed with the buyer before they ever saw the house for there to be a dual agency. So this is a presumption that if I'm representing the buyer also already with that buyer agency agreement, then this is not going to be, that situation is not going to be included here. This is talking about an unrepresented buyer.
John,
Okay, correct. Yeah, and so whoever's on the Zoom, I just wanted to go to Howard for a second, then I'm going to go to you. Okay, Howard?
I'm just gonna add that the final sentence where you leave it blank kind of adds to the clarification of some of the questions. So the last piece there where it says it's equal, if you don't fill in anything, it's the same percentage you read from.
Right.
Which means that if the buyer comes in and the buyer agency agreement, you could also specifically ask for a commission.
Yeah.
from that buyer,
Yeah.
rather than have kind of.
Because representation, we know from Washington state law that representation and compensation are completely unrelated. And I think naturally as human beings, we want to assume that they're linked and they're just not under Washington law. They're not linked. Okay, so the question on from the Zoom.
This is Kristen. I don't know that it's a question, but I want to make sure I'm clear on this because this is what I'm reading from 4A and 4B with those extra paragraphs. So I understand how we do our listing. I understand if it's an unrepresented buyer now, if they come to us and they really want us to write up the offer and we don't have a buyer's agency with them. This is already pre-done before I've even listed the house. So the nice thing I see is we'll put, let's say for an example, 3% in the listing firm, 3% for the unrepresented buyer. I'd put in maybe 3% for the buyer brokerage if going forward. And then if I'm going to put in 3% on this dual agency because all my buyers have agency agreements. So if they happen to want to go see the house that I have listed and then write an offer, then it already states that the seller will be also paying me the 3% to handle that dual agency. And then I
Right.
love non-member brokerage. That means that if I have a house I'm writing an offer on down in the RMLS down in Longview, that we can use this also. If that listing agent had used this form, then it's showing that they are offering the brokerage compensation to us.
Right, which we've had nothing to address that in the past.
Correct. Okay, so I'm understanding that correctly, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and also it is lines 42 through 44 that addresses the issue of that dual agency. Okay, so if there's that dual agency, you again are pre-agreeing that if you have a buyer you represent, you write them up on your list, on that listing, this is what the commission is going to be. Okay. Which, if I'm pre-agreeing, I'm assuming this buyer is one that I have a prior buyer agency relationship with. I could sell them any house, but I'm going to sell them your house. So you want to financially penalize me for doing that? Or would you like to just pay me what normally would be paid? Right? Okay, so I'm compensated for the buyer, compensated for the seller side, right? So going back up just a little bit to 4B, 4B is where you would put in what's going to be paid by the seller to the buyer's firm, right? So instead of going through the listing firm, it's going to be paid directly from the seller to the buyer's firm, and escrow is going to facilitate doing that. And so under the premise of the example I'm giving of 6 and then 3 and 3, this would be a 3%, right? It would be written in here, 3%. Now, could a seller write in 2.5, 2, 1.5, 1, $10, 0? Yeah, they could. So how do we deal with that? How we dealt with that in the past? Form 41C. Form 41C is a form that we'll be going over here if we have time. Otherwise, we'll have to do this again another day, right, and finish up the forms. But 41C is the one that you would address that commission with. So that's how that listing form change is taking place. There's a tail clause that's changed. They call it a tail clause now, and so they used to call it an extender clause. And that's at the very top of page 2 of this listing agreement, expiration of listing term. So there's a default of 6 months. And to again appease the DOJ, they have put in here that if the expiration of the, within 6 months of the expiration, let's see if these parties, you know, somebody who learned about the listing through your efforts and through the MLS efforts, makes the sale, then you're entitled to that commission, right? So that was the extender clause we've always had. They call it a tail clause now, and then they have an option. So it's not just automatically 6 months to please the DOJ. Okay, because these are all issues the DOJ has been hammering on the MLSs for a while now. So that's the listing form. And then,
Does that mean if, okay, so the seller fires you, list it with somebody else, or the listing expires and they choose to list with somebody else? And then somebody that came into my open house calls me and says, you know, I was in there and I want to see it. I want to write an offer. That means the seller owes me a compensation.
yeah, that's the extender for 6 months by default. Okay, so Form 21, which is the purchase and sale contract, I'm going to be looking at of this.
Excuse me. Can we scroll down, please? This is Julia. Sorry, can we just scroll down to the next form if we're on that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. With my technology wizardry, I'm gonna there's that extender clause or whatever.
See if we can get rid of that box. Yeah.
And then going to form. There's the addendum, which we were tossing out for now and may not even use, or we may, but we'll go over it then at that time. So now let's look at Form 21. And on Form 21, nothing's changing except for that now we have line in our current purchase sale agreement, we have a line 16 that is for the addenda. And we would put the addenda in there that we're going to have in this agreement. Now that 16 is moved to 17 to be number 17, and 16 is now one that says buyer brokerage firm compensation offered in listing. Okay, now if this is on autofill and you check the box that says pay as offered, then supposedly the autofill is going to then put in what the commission was that the seller agreed in the listing contract to pay to the buyer's agent. So in the example we're using, it would be, let's say, 3%. So that means it would show up as 3%. But there could be situations that vary from that. And so that's what the Form 41 C is for, is to deal with those variations. And so Form 41C, if you hadn't been using it, is going to be one that's going to be used pretty much in every transaction. And so Form 41, what was Form 41A, which is a buyer agency agreement, has changed to be just Form 41. In Form 41, if you've not been using that buyer agency agreement, you're going to want to be using it in every transaction. Because technically, the way the DOJ expects to see this to comply with antitrust laws, technically, we're representing the buyer. The buyer is supposed to pay us compensation. Okay, but we're still dealing with it the same way. It's just that we put wording in here to make it so it doesn't look like a buyer's locked in or a seller's locked in. It's giving freedom of choice for them in this. And so that's how it goes. Now that then is how that commission is going to be addressed, is right there on the front. And then you can skip all the way down to page 5, which I'm going to do right now. Go all the way to the bottom of page 5. 21, Form 21 is the one we're on. Yep, clear down to the very bottom of page, there it is, page 5, okay? So of this 6-page form, okay, so is it currently 5 pages or 6 pages? Currently 6 pages? But the 6th page currently is just 1 paragraph. Paragraph, whatever. So now it's changed, you know, just because of formatting, we've got V, W, and X on the last page. And so, but the only thing that's changed is that paragraph 16 and then paragraph U, which is some extended language in paragraph U, which is right here at the very bottom of page 5. Page 6. Okay. What? Used to be page 5. No. Well, it says page 5. It says 506. It does. Wow. Well, mine says 506, so I'm going to go with what I got. So in on the top paragraph, it should say it says 6 of 6. On my sample form from the MLS, it says 5 of 6. Okay, so on the screen it says 6 of 6, and that's yeah, that's weird that they did that.
Oh, and it's 7 of 6.
Yeah, you can't have a 7 of 6.
We do have 7 of 6 in the packet, but the second page is blank. Earlier in there, there's.
Oh, okay, so that was part of their example. Okay, so it's going to be basically at the bottom of page 5, okay? On your thing here, it says 6. And so it says in that paragraph U for the heading, it says commission, brokerage firm. Now it says brokerage firm compensation. Okay, so they've changed the word commission. This is to please the DOJ. And they've, that's the DOJ, that one. So it's, the word is compensation that the forms are going to be using now. And you can call it commission if you want verbally. But the term in writing is going to be compensation. So the point there is that if you're writing a Form 34 or something else, and you're going to write in the word commission, you're probably going to want to use the word compensation. And so then the seller and buyer shall pay compensation in accordance with the listing compensation agreement. Okay, the listing brokerage firm's compensation shall be paid as specified in the listing agreement. Okay, so it's going to be really important to look at that listing agreement and just so you know, so that sellers and listing agents can't be, when they know they've got a hot buyer and buyer's agent after this property, they can't suddenly change the commission agreement. They can't do that because now it's going to go back. It's either 3 or 4 days. I can't remember which, but it's going to go back 3 or 4 days in time. So they can't just change it that day or the 2 days before they expect that offer to come in. Okay, because that's something in the past that's been used as manipulation by listing agents and sellers sometimes, is to change the listing agreement at the last second and lower the commission. So that can't be done now because we have some wording built in to guard against that. But it does say this new wording that's all written in now says the buyer brokerage firm's compensation offered in the listing shall be paid by seller as set forth in this agreement or any addendum here too. If there is any inconsistency between this paragraph, I really have been struggling with for a long time, ever since I got this, because it says if there is any inconsistency between the buyer brokerage firm's compensation offered in the listing and the description of the offered compensation stated in specific term number 16, the terms of the listing shall supersede and control. Okay, so I think I just answered my own question by just reading it again, because my question was, what if we're changing what was in the listing to have it be a higher commission? And putting that into 16. So you don't want, so in other words, if you're going to put in a higher commission, then what's in the listing and the seller's going to agree to that, that's going to have to be on a different form, because per paragraph 16, if there's a difference, then it's going to defer to the listing compensation.
So in today's advertisement for listing this property that goes in the multiple, just states the SOC. Is it going to be in the future showing both sides?
I don't think that is going to. No, I think it's
Not
only,
gonna change.
it's going to, yeah.
We say good.
I don't know what we sell.
I think it should be, I mean, why not disclose it?
Well, that might be too.
Because it, I mean, it should be, there are some unreputable owners out there that take 3 and give 2.
That's right. And some,
Well-
I've seen some take 4 and give 2.
But I will say that the DOJ looks at that as an antitrust violation when you're saying it's got to be 3 and 3. No. So the DOJ says, no, it could be whatever. So the listing,
Well, no, it's just the
List-
point that it should be stated was what,
yeah,
it doesn't have to be. As long as we know.
right. That's true. Yeah. So I'm going to assume it's going to stay the same. Yes.
What's specific term number 16?
16 is the line item.
Oh, 16 is on the first page. If you go back to the very first page, right before the signatures. So that's the part where you write in the commission.
What is the addendum that you would specify otherwise?
41C.
I have a question. Sorry.
Can you see that?
No,
Say-
I'm on the computer.
Okay, so say that again, please.
I have a question. How are we going to verify what commission is on the listing agreement? Do we have a right to ask for a copy to see that, or?
Well, no, it's going to be, no, we wouldn't have a right to do that. It's going to be posted in the MLS. In the listing. It's going to be posted in the listing. That will be published and you'll see what that commission is. Yeah, yeah. So there's certain aspects that don't change. But the biggest change here is that the seller is not paying the listing brokerage and the listing brokerage paying the buyer's brokerage. No, the seller is paying directly to the listing brokerage and paying directly to the buyer's brokerage.
Okay, so in regards to the agents who were making those changes the day or anything, there's still no really any way to verify that they're not doing that our side, on the buyer side, I mean.
No. And so I think what, so in the past, what we've done for years and years and years, right, is if it's listed for 6%, we find out that the listing agent got 4 and I only got 2, then boy, I'm going to teach him a lesson, and all this kind of stuff going on. And so they're just saying, no, that's not going to exist anymore, because we've got a separate agreement with the seller, separate agreement for the buyer's commission. They're separate things. And so that also does away with that potential of antitrust violation of trying to control how much of the total commission is going where.
Thank you.
So anyway, so if there is any inconsistency between the buyer brokerage firm's compensation offered and this and this term number 16, which is the commission agreed, then the listing is going to supersede and control. That's if there's a conflict between those two. There shouldn't be, because if you're using autofill, it's going to autofill what's in the listing. The only conflict I could see is if that listing agent and or seller tried to change the commission going to the buyer's agent, knowing that there's a hot buyer on that property now and buyer's agent, and they try pulling a fast one, and so that could become a conflict or whatever, and it's going to go back to the listing agreement. And then there's I'm trying to remember where I saw that wording. There's wording in there that protects from that, basically saying that within either 3 or 4 days of the offer being submitted, that if it's changed, then it goes back to the original one from 4 days ago.
John, this is Kristen.
Okay? Hi,
Um,
Chris.
Hi. Well, I thought it was per our regular business practice anyway, since we have to upload it. But as soon as we see the listing and our clients decide that they're probably going to make an offer, I download the 360 view. So I have a copy of what was in the listing when we showed it, so that we have proof, for a matter of fact, that they may have adjusted the commission if that was to be we're challenging it, let's say.
Yeah.
That's
Uh,
regular business practice.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's regular business practice, and we should always be doing that. We should always be checking on those, on what the most recent commission is as we're writing the offer. And
Right.
now
yeah,
we've got this buffer of 3 or 4 days to go back, but we still should be checking it.
right. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget to do that until you get ready to write up the offer, or maybe new agents don't think of it right off the bat. So it's just a reminder that if you see a property that you're going to be writing an offer on, or even think that you're going to write an offer, download that 360 view so that you have it available.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you.
Hey, John, this is Dolly. I have a question.
Okay,
So my question is this. So let's say I have a buyer and I already have a buyer's agency agreement, and the buyer goes to the open house, let's say that, and they decide to write the offer with the agent there, with the listing agent, how it's gonna impact us as a buyer's agent when we already have a buyer's agency agreement in place?
well, we're going to go over that right now. So if I
Okay.
don't answer your question this, going over the Form 41, then bring it up again, but I think I'll answer that question for you. Okay, so let's go to Form 41 and go down to the compensation paragraph, which is where the changes are, is in this sample, paragraph 5. So it says, page 1. It's not highlighted, no. Because the whole thing changed, I think. So compensation, if purchase, so if buyer purchases real property located in the area during the term, then buyer shall pay to buyer brokerage firm the compensation as follows. Now, I want to bring this to your attention. There's a difference now between an exclusive and a non-exclusive buyer agency agreement. So this particular one is the exclusive buyer's agency agreement.
The only one I'll use.
Correct. Which is the reason I have this as the only one here. So the other form, I'm not sure, it might be the Form 41A now. That is the non-exclusive, which just takes away from you, right? So this one, as an exclusive buyer's agency agreement, means that we are agreeing with the buyer that for this period of time identified, and within this geographical area identified, if the buyer buys a property that you show them, or buys a property, I guess, that commissions due, right? Because the non-exclusive would mean if you didn't bring it to their attention, there's no commission due. The exclusive means if it was brought to their attention, commissions due. Okay, so under that premise, we go down to the compensation paragraph 5, and it says if buyer purchases property, then this compensation is going to be as follows. And then on line 19, there's going to be the percentage. So in this premise I'm using, this example I'm using, let's put in, let's say 3% of the purchase price. Okay, and it could be a dollar amount or it could be other. Keys to my 2016 Ford Mustang, whatever it is. Compensation from seller, paragraph A, 5A. So the buyer's saying, what? I have to pay you? What? Okay, let's keep reading. 5A, this is what 5A says. So as long as it's purchased through the MLS, then we're going to, then you're not going to have to pay. The seller has pre-agreed that they're going to pay a commission to me. So this just means for you, buyer, that you're going to want to focus on those ones where the seller has agreed to pay a commission. Because if they haven't agreed to pay any commission to the buyer's agent, they put a 0 in there, or they put in only 1% or something that I'm not going to work for, then we've got a problem. And you might be liable for it. But see, we're working together. I represent you. And you should also in turn be loyal to me. So we should be helping each other through this and protecting each other's interests. And in so doing, that means we want to focus on those where they're offering a fair commission to me. And if they're not, we're going to have to negotiate that.
Probably why you saw a change with big national ones where they now list buyer's commission is.
Right, right. So we're going to have to have good dialogues, as we're talking to buyers, and show value and things like that, and show the value in being unified in making this purchase, because in the past, sellers have tried dividing their agent and the buyer in order to squirrel away that commission for themselves. And they use all kinds of dialogues and manipulations to try to make the buyer think they're going to have to pay more for the property and all this. And we want to be prepared for that. And so we're not going to do that in here. But I do strongly recommend that you get involved or even bring up your own groups of dialogues. And we do have a scripts, I think, most every day. And these would be some great scripts to work on is with buyers and this buyer agency agreement, right? Yes.
I have a buyer. I've had this dialogue. We need to work with each other on helping, et cetera, et cetera. Now, buyer insists that they want this property that's offering no compensation, but they do not have the money to pay me. What do
Okay.
you do?
You use 41C, which we're going to go to next.
Okay.
And in the 41C, we're going to negotiate that.
We negotiate that with the seller.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so I also want to bring to your attention 5C that says filtering listings. So basically it's saying no longer can you as an agent put in a field for filtering listings by commission. So you would have to bring all listings to the buyer's attention, regardless of whether the commission is $0 or $10 or whatever it is. You got to bring all listings to their attention, because that's really what your buyer agency says anyway.
Consider that 98% of all people find the homes they want themselves online. Okay. Then you have to have that conversation with that buyer. They find something that they really, really want, but that's the commission that they will pay.
Mhm.
You maybe.
Right, there's a tremendous misunderstanding, been a tremendous misunderstanding for a long time by buyers and sellers, but mostly buyers and agents, and they don't get it, and nor do the financial people who basically have stirred up this whole mess anyhow. They don't get what we're doing. They don't get the value of what we're doing, right? They think a buyer should be able to just go online, click a couple boxes, make their purchase, and bam, there's the deed, and you deposit the money and it's all done, right? And there's a little bit more that goes into it, right, than that. And so the finding of the property, they think that the finding of the property is the value, bottom line. That's it. That's all we do. So this is where we have to work on expanding our dialogue to include what our services are. What are we doing? What's the value of using us? Okay, because really for a buyer, right? Because really finding the property, we have the internet, we've had the internet, for a long time, since 90, 3 or something, you know, it was as long as I can remember, that we've had the ability to access, you know, listings and get the stuff out there and find it. And so what we tried to do as a real estate community was we tried to keep the information from them. We used to have just catalogs, listing catalogs. And so you were fined if you gave anybody your listing catalog or let anybody look at your catalog, and we would keep those things like a holy Bible, you know, glued to us and stuff. And now it's just not, you know, that's a silly premise anymore. It's just out there for everyone to use. And so we've got to identify our values, why we're worth what we're worth, and what that's bringing to the buyer. So when I do my forms classes, I always try to emphasize in those forms classes value that you're being able to show to your buyer as you're writing the contract. And it's so, I mean, it becomes so obvious to me every time I do my classes. As I go through them, I'm like, you know, they can't see that value. Just that alone is, you know, could be tens of thousands of dollars. And so, so I'll just give you one example. So what was the paragraph 15, which is for those in the purchase and sale contract, which is for those things that are encumbrances or that are special assessments against the property, like a sewer capacity charge. So let's say there's a $10,000 sewer capacity charge, which is meaning it's at the very beginning of it. Okay, so just by checking the box that says the seller is going to pay it at closing, as a buyer's agent, you're saving them a lot of money. And if you don't know to do that, you leave them both blank or check the wrong one. I mean, there's going to be a problem that's going to be tens of thousands, well, at least $10,000, right? And lawyer fees and everything else. So our value becomes understanding the contracts, understanding how we're going to do the job better for them than anybody else would. And I'm not disparaging my fellow realtors, but there's a big difference between realtors on understanding of the contract and what and where a realtor who knows the contracts can save their client a lot of money. Mark.
I had a seller that was in the development up in Atlanta. He never disclosed to me that he had a sewer assessment. And so when it came to closing, it was checked that the seller will take care of the assessments. It was a $30,000 bill that he had to cough up, which the buyer benefited from it.
Right.
Oh, wow.
So
right.
Make sure you ask your sellers if there's an assessment. That's the problem.
Was it a newer property?
Yep.
Yeah.
And you also will run into that change in the septic to a sewer.
Yeah.
There's a great site that will calculate exactly what that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we just had that happen yesterday. We just had it happen yesterday, and we represented both sides as a firm. So we had the listing side on the other side, and everybody did it right except escrow. So they didn't collect the fee and pay it, and so we're having to do that retroactively now, a few days later.
This and understanding. In fact, I know there's several classes coming up with different title companies. I'm wondering how they're going to address this once it gets in title.
Yeah.
It's on their back to put.
Yeah, that's right. They've got to follow the instructions. These are the instructions. Okay, so filtering listings, be aware that there is a box you can check to give an exception to that filtering of listings kind of thing. And you're pre-agreeing that there's certain things you're not going to bring to their attention. Maybe you could put 0 there, but I think it's fine to bring 0 commissions to them too, because we got the Form 41C to deal with that. That's the filtering of listings. You can't.
What is that box?
Oh, that if you have to show all listings to the buyer, no matter what the commission is, if there's going to be an exception to that, like the ones that say 0.
Otherwise, unless otherwise said.
Yeah.
So what's the check in the line after that? What would you put in there? I mean,
0 commission or whatever is agreed.
if the buyer says,
Well, don't show me anything that says zero connection.
Right. Okay,
Can I ask you a question?
sure.
This is always tricky, but for 5B, compensation from the buyer. So if you have a buyer's agency agreement, you have 3% on that line. On the buyer's agency agreement,
Okay.
3% is what's on the line.
Okay.
And you sell a home that's 2.5%.
Okay.
I've never seen or heard of anybody asking for the 0.5%, but based upon the form, they legally are entitled to
Correct.
ask for it.
Correct.
And so my question is, how is that handled, especially with this new form? Because a buyer that's actually reading what they sign is gonna say, hold on a second, Howard. If it's only 2.5% and we're signing this buyer's agency agreement for 3%, do I owe you guys half a percentage point? And I've never really been comfortable with what the right answer is.
Go ahead, Jerry.
There is an agent, I don't know if I can answer it totally, but there is an agent at Windermere. She's a top agent, and she gets it every single time. If she always writes in 6%. Or 3%. And if the commission is 2.5%, she has her conversations with the buyer, and she told me that she always gets that extra 5% for having a conversation with the buyer. I don't know how she does it, and I don't know what she says.
And it has to be predicated on the buyer actually having funds to pay that half percent,
Well,
right?
it does, but she says she always gets it, not that transaction. She pretty much does.
Okay, well, so that's a great one for dialogues. Okay, so that's a great one for the dialogues that we can
And
use
it has been done.
in those
So that's the
sessions.
plan. You said you haven't seen it, it hasn't been done.
Yeah.
Can you answer this question? Are they obligated? Like,
Yes.
Legally, they are
Yes.
obligated, but
Yes.
do you have to actually ask for it to be enforced?
No. No, our current policy is that if it's going to be less than 2% on either side, then you need to ask me for permission to do that. And as long as it's a one-time thing, I'll probably give it. But what we're trying to prevent is from agents who are advertising or promoting through the internet that they're doing things for 1% or whatever. And we don't want one agent undermining every other agent in the firm.
Is there different language that should be used? Other than putting 3% on the line, should you
No.
add something to the other? Or that's
No.
the practice involved?
I would not do it any different, but we're going to get to that right now on Form 41C. So we got like 2 minutes and we got to get through Form 41C. So on Form 41C, we've got a change, major changes. So the first choice for boxes here is the buyer's brokerage firm's compensation when no compensation is offered by the seller. Okay, so there is no compensation, no offer of compensation for the seller to the buyer brokerage firm in the listing. This is lines 6, 7, and 8 of Form 41C. So line 6, 7, and 8 says this, and then it says that you can check the box that the seller has not signed a listing agreement. And it says seller shall pay buyer brokerage firm compensation of, let's say 3% using the premise example we've been using. Okay, so that is for when there's no compensation offered by the seller. Okay, so we would,
What does that mean? The seller has not signed a listing.
well, it's an off-market sale. It's an off-market sale.
Sorry.
Or would this also be if, way back when they signed the listing agreement, they agreed to pay the listing side 3%, they go, no, I'm not gonna, you look at that buyer agency that's gonna come to us, that buyer who's gonna come, he's gonna decide how much he's worth. Wouldn't this be the appropriate form of auction at that point?
Maybe, I think we've got a different one for that though.
Oh.
So let's look at all of them. So the second choice here is that there is a buyer representation agreement and the compensation offered is not sufficient. Offered in the listing agreement is not sufficient. So we are asking for the seller to pay an additional amount to total line 14 to total this. So let's say that it said that my buyer agency agreement was 3%. Says 3%, the commission offered is only 2%. So there's a 1% difference. That 1% is going to be put into box 13 on line 13 for a total of 3% on line 14.
So are you automatically submitting the 41 and the 42?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. So what we've had in the past is wording that says that if we have a buyer agency agreement and we're asking for more commission, that's in the old Form 41C, that you have to include a copy of your buyer agency agreement. No more. Wording's gone. That wording's taken out. So it's assumed in every case now that there is a buyer agency agreement. You don't have to show them a copy of it at all. That's confidential information with you and your buyer, and you're asking for the seller to pay the additional commission to reach that amount. So there's going to be a lot of, first of all, before you even go out working with the buyer, there's going to have to be a lot of discussion with them about these situations, right? And you're going to have the good dialogues for them. And then throughout the process, these things are going to come up and you're going to have to talk to them about those issues again. And you're going to have to explain why and explain value. People always want to know why. They don't just shell out money to shell out money. They want to know why. And so you got to have the good dialogues and explanations of those. And then the third box is the credit to the buyer. So if you have talked with your buyer and your buyer says, you know what, I told you I'd give you, pay you a 3% commission, but really, why don't I pay you a 2%? Because we're getting into we want this property and we're getting into a real problem here. And we want, and so we need that 1%. We need to have that 1% go for our purchase, right? So in the past, we've had to write up separate addendum like Form 34 or something with freehand wording to say that 1% of the buyer's commission is going to go toward, now we got this paragraph to check and just put in the amount that's going to go back to the buyer. As well as, in the last one, it's a reduction to the buyer's brokerage firm compensation to have that money just directly go, to the buyer. So the first one says that the seller shall credit such amount to buyer's obligations at closing for a total of that 3%. And this last paragraph I'm just looking at here says that buyer brokerage firm's compensation shall be reduced from the amount offered in the listing by blank percent of sales price, which shall be the total compensation paid to the buyer brokerage firm by seller. The purchase price offered by buyer reflects already this reduction in compensation owed to buyer brokerage. So maybe we've had to negotiate price-wise for this. So this isn't money going back to the buyer. This is because of the price. And it's letting the seller know that we've adjusted the price to reflect what this is doing. Buyer brokerage firm's total compensation paid by the seller shall be blank percent. That's on line 27. And so those are your four choices along with the box that says other. And we're already 10 minutes, we're already 5 minutes, sorry, we're already 5 minutes over time. So we can't go into a big discussion on those issues, but you can see they're huge issues, right? And my intent here today was to bring these changes to your attention. You've got the frequently asked questions in the legal bulletin 222. So I recommend you look through those. There's some good ones in there. And many of the answers are going to be there for you. So please do that. And then maybe we can do a meeting. Maybe I can do it in a team meeting, just this Form 41C. And just talk about a couple of those situations and maybe even have some dialogue. In fact, if you want, I'll do it on Tuesday. That's coming. And so we can address some of that and there you go.
Thank you, John.
Welcome.
Hey, John.
Yeah, we got a question right here and then I'll get to you, okay?
Okay.
Agreement with the seller.
Yeah.
When these things go into effect, I'm guessing it's our obligation to tell them that they do not have to pay the buyers. We're supposed to disclose that to them, that they do not have to pay the buyer's compensation.
Yeah, I think.
But that the buyer can come, the buyer's agent can come back and ask.
Correct. Correct. We're going to want to explain in that listing appointment, we're going to want to explain how that works.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, thanks everybody for being here. Okay, now we go here. So you had a question, Kristen or
Yes.
whoever that.
Dolly. So my question was, like, you already have a buyer's agency agreement with the buyer, and what you talked about, how seller's agent can manipulate and all that. So they go to the open house somewhere and they decide to write the offer with the listing agent. How our buyer's agency agreement will be in effect in that case?
Well, if with that buyer, you had an agreement signed with them, then that buyer is going to owe you that commission amount.
Okay. Alrighty, that clears up. Thank you.
Dolly, I just learned that on here it says talking ... and it says Dolly. And that's the first time I noticed that. So I'm okay. All right. Thanks you, everybody. So Tuesday I'll talk about 41C.
Very confused.
So who caused all of this is because